African countries are spending more on debt service than any other expenditure, including public services, including health, including education, including provision of water. We have reached the point where debt and well-being are mutually exclusive. And this is a matter of fundamental justice. These economic and financial challenges associated with climate change keep pushing African governments into greater macroeconomic instability and closer to debt distress. Low and middle income countries are now contending with a conditional fiscal burden of trying to recover from increasingly frequent and high-cost climate crises. Climate change is not an exclusively African problem, but an existential threat to humanity. Unfortunately, it is being addressed in terms of the usual geopolitical divide between the global north and the global south, developed countries versus developing countries, or rich countries against poor countries, just because the net polluters are from one side while the net victims are on the other. It is time for Africa to champion a new vision to transform climate action into green climate positive growth. No nation should have to contend with crises as frequent, severe, and large scale as climate crises currently besieging Africa on their own. And no country should ever have to choose between climate action and national development on account of limited resources. The fundamental problem with these pledges and promises is that despite the best of our intentions and our utmost endeavors, none of them has materialized. This brings us to the question that inevitably follows. What then? What do we do? We also need to facilitate trade by making it possible for business people to be able to transact their goods, their services, without the unnecessary complications in changing currencies. That is why we want the Pan-African payment system that is going to assist African business people to be able to trade and move goods and services better. And I want to ask you as members of parliament to work with us to reform the African Union, to give it voice, to give it structure that is going to make sure that Africa speaks in the language that is understood, with clarity on our issues, so that we can drive our agenda, grow our trade, and make sure Africa moves forward. I think we have a 0.2% tax that is supposed to be levied in our countries. We want to ask every country to live up to that commitment so that we can support the African Union. Otherwise, if we allow the African Union to be supported by others, we run the risk of African Union being controlled by those who pay for it. We are making an offer to the world that we do not want any more to be in the victim corner. We want to be in the table of discussion on arriving at a solution to the challenge that we face collectively. Africa's position and offer is that we are able and we are willing to do our part in full and to commit our assets, including mineral resources, energy resources, agricultural capacity, and natural capital to promote the global decarbonization agenda. Africa is the young, clean, green continent of the future. Our multilateral institution system struggled to take into account African sovereignty and is structurally unable to attend to African aspirations. The mirrors do not reflect African faces because the architecture is defective and is un-African. I am not making the argument that Africa should despair and abandon all engagement in international affairs. I am not advocating that as regards global solidarity and collective action, Africa has the option to give up. No. On the contrary, I am arguing that as a continent, we have a historic opportunity to define a clear position, project a strong voice, and deliver a bold new message to the world. We are not a continent without resources. The narrative has always been built that we are the poorest continent. We are not. We have assets. I have enlisted our assets. We have huge, tremendous renewable energy resources. We have mineral resources. We have huge resources in smart agriculture. We have the youngest population. We are the continent of the future. All we want is that we want a new discussion where we are part of the discussion. And we are saying, and let me tell you leaders, because I'm speaking to policymakers here, we are saying we do not want anymore to be the continent that we are asking for help, we are asking for aid. We want to have a different conversation. We want to have a conversation of equals. We want to bring our assets. We have assets as a continent, and we want these assets to count for something. We have already made the decision as the government of Kenya that for you people from Congo, Brazzaville, from tomorrow, you will not need any visa to come to Kenya. It is part of the reason that we'll begin to increase trade between our countries. When people move, ideas move. Relationships are built. Business is built. Enterprise is built. Trade is built. And that is what we must do. You are policymakers. I really want to persuade you. We now have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that is going to facilitate trade between all our countries. Among the conversations we are going to have with President Sassou is how to connect the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic by road. From Mombasa to Kampala, the road is already built. From Kampala to Beni, the road is being built. We want to build it now from Beni to Kisangani, and then from Kisangani, we want to bring it all the way to Pont Noir here, by road, by water, and by rail.